very much, Mr Amos, and I'd like to start by congratulating my honourable friend on securing this debate. I think that the amount of time that we spend in this House discussing conflict prevention pales in comparison to the amount of time we spend discussing conflicts that have not been prevented, and perhaps that balance does need to be adjusted. And so I would wholeheartedly support the idea my honourable friend put forward that there should be an annual debate on this issue within the House, rather than having to rely on the randomness of ballots to secure such debate in Westminster Hall. I think it has been excellent for the quality of the debate to have so many contributions from members and the co-chairs of the all-party parliamentary group on conflict issues and those with involvements in other groups dealing with specific parts of the world. And what has also been very welcome, of course, has been the great consensus that I suspect is existing right round the room on this issue of conflict prevention. I particularly liked the Honourable Member for Hayes and Harlington's idea that this should be taken out of the political knockabout in the run-up to the general election, and I think that would be a great piece of work that the all-party group might be able to do by getting all of the different parties to agree on some key priorities for this issue after the election, whatever the result would be, so that there can be indeed that kind of long-term strategy with continuity. It almost goes without saying that conflict prevention is absolutely essential, and obviously there's a clear and obvious humanitarian objective to that. But I think what has also come out very clearly in today's debate is actually the economic imperative as well, which is an important thing to take into account when we're in a recession in particular. And I was really just quite staggered by some of the figures that $64 billion is the average cost of each conflict around the world, and when multiplied, the figure of 175 trillion is just mind-boggling to give the total. And indeed that for every dollar spent on conflict prevention, $2,000 is spent on military and defence. And again, it seems that in terms of actually saving us money in the future, spending more on conflict prevention would seem to be a wise thing to do. In my remarks, Mr Amos, I just want to touch on a few key elements of conflict prevention as regards foreign policy, the support that's given particularly to fragile states, the peace-building process and how that relates to preventing future conflicts, the role of women in conflict prevention, and then just finally on the strategic future threats that we'll be facing, which various members have mentioned as regards the issues particularly of climate change and access to resources. The Honourable Member from Ryder was quite right in his contribution that so often we have these warning signs that there is about to be a massive problem in a corner of the world somewhere, but we ignore them and we don't act, and or indeed if action is taken, it isn't taken swiftly enough. And of course the responsibility to protect was supposed to make that a little bit easier, but we're still finding that the world is sitting back far too often when conflicts arise. And it was just interesting, I was sort of making a list as different parts of the world were mentioned, and it's a very long list of all of the places that people have been concerned about in today's debate where conflict is likely and could occur. We've got all of the different countries in the Middle East recently. Of course, Yemen has come very much to our attention. There's the ongoing issues in Cyprus and the Balkans still, there's the Caucasus, there's a whole range of issues in Africa, and then of course you've got South America and Asia as well, and it really does bring home the scale of the problem. The resourcing issue, I think, is an important one, and that there was a good range of questions asked by my honourable friend that I will very much look forward to the Minister's responses to. And I think there is a sort of genuine concern about the cuts that we have had to UK civilian contribution in peacekeeping, and the recent scaling back of the current year's FCO budget, for example, in counter-terrorism in Pakistan, as a result of the exchange rate change, which has meant that the FCO is facing budgetary difficulties because of the Treasury ruling that when the exchange rate changes, the FCO has to find the funds from within its budget. And of course, that is currently very difficult with the strength of the pound. So I think it will be interesting to hear the Minister's response on the resource issues. It does seem that it is sensible to spend in order to prevent future conflicts and indeed future expense on that front. And so I think even within a recession, this is an area that we really ought to not be cutting, because it's a false economy to do so. I wanted to touch on the issue of peace building also. It's obviously usually part of bringing an end to conflict, but getting it right is so essential to preventing conflict starting up again. And we've seen far too many places around the world where there's been intervention as sort of a sticking plaster solution, and then once the resource is taken away, actually the conflict just revives because the underlying issues haven't been resolved. And the importance of actually taking a proactive stance on just building the peace rather than the peacekeeping, which has been the traditional role within the UN, I think can't be overestimated. It's about involving regional partners around the country or area in question, but also local stakeholders very much on the ground within communities, so that they're actually building a peace that reflects the needs of local people, not just, dare I say, our ideas from many thousands of miles away on how it should be done. And this is obviously something which the United Nations has been recognising is important, and setting up the Peace-Building Commission in 2005, of course. I was very fortunate to meet with representatives from the Peace-Building Commission at the UN with fellow MPs on a visit to the UN sponsored by the FCO in 2008. And of course we're looking forward to the UN review of that commission and how it's working, so that we can learn the lessons of what is successful. My honourable friend also mentioned the role of women, and particularly within communities, getting that buy-in. And I think this is very important in building the structures for peace. Last year, the UN passed Security Council Resolution 1889, which reaffirmed the principles laid out almost a decade ago in Security Council Resolution 1325. And that recognised, amongst other things, the important role women need to play in conflict prevention. Despite making up more than half of the world's population, women are often absent from negotiating tables and decision-making circles where the decisions are made about conflict prevention. And I'd very much recommend to honourable members the Gender Action for Peace and Security, which is a network of NGOs on this matter. And they recently produced a short parliamentarian's guide to women, peace and security, and it's very instructive. The statistic that stuck out for me was that in the past 25 years, only 1 in 40 peace agreement signatories have been women, which just shows the lack of involvement in that crucial stage, which I think also has an impact on whether conflicts recur. The UK is, thankfully, one of, sadly, only 14 countries which has a national action plan for implementing 1325, so I'm glad that we do have that, and I know it's currently under review to be released next month. I do think that it is important that we take this issue forward, and I do know in October somebody from the FCO told the all-party group on women, peace and security that the department was finding it difficult to get women in senior positions in conflict prevention and resolution, including here in the UK. And so if the Minister's got any opportunity to update whether there's been progress in that situation, that would be very welcome. Just finally, Mr Amos, to touch on the issue of climate change, which again various honourable members have mentioned. Looking ahead to what the drivers of future conflicts will be, then access to energy and to water and to land that can be used for crop production, and the changes that are likely to happen to all of these things as a result of climate change means that it has to be a key priority in looking at this issue of conflict prevention. The Oxford Research Group's report, Sustainable Security for the 21st Century, says that the long-term security implications for all countries are far more serious, lasting and destructive than those of international terrorism, and that is really putting into stark terms the scale of the threat. So it really needs to go in sort of hand in glove with the government's policies on assisting with adaptation to climate change and preventing further dangerous climate change through mitigation. And I do very much hope the FCO is working closely with the Department of Energy and Climate Change on those issues, because I know that climate change is another one of the FCO's strategic priorities. In conclusion, Mr Amos, I very much appreciate today's opportunity to discuss these important issues today and welcome the constructive spirit of this debate, and in that spirit I look forward to the Minister's response.
Mr.